climate change and what the Green Deal means for you and me. Greenpeace seeks to put an end to polluting, dirty energy, to stop the flow of money to destructive coal and nuclear power.
What we need is real, drastic emission cuts at the source. But of course, just reducing emissions is not enough. Our greenhouse gas emissions has to stop. To stay below 1.5 degrees, we need to keep the carbon in the ground.
Keeping carbon in the ground means we must abandon our coal, gas, oil and nuclear industries. Wind and solar can't produce the heat and the power for us to make steel. We could not produce pottery or bricks. We could not produce cars or any other of our industrial manufacture. We could not power our drinking water or our wastewater systems. Our hospitals require three-phase electricity too. Renewable energy, wind and solar, accounts for 13 to 14% of the current UK supply. Energy from coal is already down to 9.2%. So when it is reported that more energy is generated by wind and solar than by coal, we can see why. Here, world energy production shows how fossil fuel use is huge. Renewable energy accounts for only a tiny proportion of what the world produces in energy. I have not included biomass as a renewable energy. Burning wood produces CO2. Wood produces less heat and power than coal. 1 tonne of coal produces 2.5 times the heat and the energy from 1 tonne of wood. Drax Power Station has been converted to burn wood biomass, and it consumes 7.5 million tonnes of wood each year. They burn brash wood, but the trees still need to be cut down in the first place. Why do they do this? To avoid fines for not producing sufficient renewable energy. Biomass is classed as a renewable energy. Some people say that to replace 28 million cars with electric vehicles, we would need an extra 60 gigawatts of electricity production to cope with the peak demand. Drax Power Station produces 4 gigawatts of electricity. We would need an extra 15 power stations the size of Drax to meet this peak demand for electrical vehicles. So we would need then to burn 112.5 million tonnes each year to provide the energy for an extra 15 power stations the size of Drax. The UK will be doing all this to reduce our CO2 emissions, to keep carbon in the ground. But the UK has already reduced CO2 emissions by 38% since 1990. Compared with CO2 emissions from around the world, the UK's contribution of CO2 to the atmosphere is tiny. It's way down the list. If we reduce CO2 emissions by 50% on the world scale, this would mean nothing, while overall CO2 emissions of China and the USA continue to increase. We are constantly bombarded by media claims of climate crisis if the UK doesn't abandon fossil fuels. Claims like this that predict global catastrophe, but like this from 2005, never actually happen. Claims of rising seas, droughts and floods, and dead polar bears, and none turn out to be true. So we in the UK are being urged to abandon our entire industry, our oil and mining, and all the employment, the high-skilled, the highly paid jobs, to meet with computer predictions. Those who rely on computer predictions never produce data or findings to support their claims. No wonder these claims always fail. They never happen. The Earth will not end in 14 years' time. We don't need to abandon our entire industry, to reduce our CO2 emissions when they have already been reduced by 38%. Polar bears are doing fine. We don't need to frighten our children. We do need to regenerate habitats and species, and thousands of passionate people are doing this already. Maybe you and I can join them to make a real difference. We can put things right. We can live in balance with planet Earth. If we are prepared to take, then we should be prepared to give back with equal measure. Together we can build a better world for our children. Thank you for listening.